So, hi, Chris. Thank you so much for joining me on A Curious Coach. And I'm super excited, as always, to hear your story. And it's an absolute privilege to have you on board today. But as normal, I'm going to pass it straight over to the guest, and that's yourself, just to really tell me a little bit about your journey, what's inspired you to get to where you are today.
So I run, my own business doing, sort of various things, brewery consultancy, brewing our own beers, and I do sort of beer-related tour guiding, cellar engineering, quite a varied, mix of different things.
Yeah.
Which is kind of one of the, main reasons for doing what I do today, is to have that variety.
Mm-hmm.
I used to work full-time in a brewery, which was good, and it's good training obviously for what I do now, but it's very much the same thing day in, day out. So quite nice to work myself now and, have that variety. Is quite different, from one week to the next.
Yeah.
Which is main, inspiration for working for myself, really.
One thing when I did some research is, and I think you're going to touch base on this, is the fact that you did a history degree. Is that right? And
yeah.
How's that threaded through? It's amazing that you've got all these different niches and these little pockets of things that you're now doing. But how did you go from a history degree into brewery and tour guides?
Yeah, I mean, it does seem quite random on the face of it to have a history degree. It doesn't really relate that much to what I do. I mean, it does relate obviously a bit to the tour guiding. I do historic pub tours around London, so hopefully, I use a little bit of that there. When I was at university, a lot of the stuff we did involved kind of walking around London and looking at, the architecture and what have you. So that, it does get a little bit of use there, but I know what you're saying. It's kind of, it's not a sort of normal route to do history and then go into brewing, but I actually started brewing before university. So I used to work, I didn't go straight to university. I left school and I worked in a brewery because it was local to where I lived. I used to just do all the kind of, manual jobs, cask cleaning, all that kind of stuff. And I did that for a year, and then I went to go to university. And the guy that ran the brewery at the time, he was quite supportive in that he said, if you go to university, you can work here during the holidays. We always need some extra help with cask washing and cleaning the tanks and all that kind of thing. And then when you finish, there would be a job for you at the end if you wanted it. I did history at university just because it kind of interested me, but it wasn't really like I had a plan with anything. And when I finished university, I was like, well, I need to get a job. So I ended up going back to the brewery, and then he trained me up there to be a brewer. They sent me to Burton-upon-Trent to do, brewer training. And that was probably just as hard as my degree, actually. It was quite kind of science-based, quite in-depth, training. So kind of, I sort of just always had worked there, as I said before, going to university. So the history degree kind of was something I did, not really knowing where it would lead, and it ended up that I probably could have gone straight into brewing anyway.
Sorry.
It was worth doing, I think. The history degree was quite helpful now, even if it's sort of a lot of what you do is kind of quite a lot of critical thinking and looking up sources and research and stuff like that, which obviously come in helpful when running my business. But it didn't kind of immediately get used when it came to brewing.
What I really like, though, and I know I kind of brought that up, but I love the fact that you integrate it, and I think there'll be a lot of people that watch this and go, oh my goodness, yes, I remember going to university with an idea in my head, but actually through needing to work, actually that caught on a passion, and that's where you're at now, and you're able to integrate two different worlds, your history, then into science and using the different skill sets. So yeah, I'm just going to keep handing it over to you because I don't know anything about that industry at all. So
I mean, as I said, it didn't immediately, wasn't kind of immediately obvious how to integrate it. But as you said now, you know, with the tour guiding, it's, I mean, obviously with COVID and stuff, it's been not quite as much guiding going on, but it is coming back. And, you know, beforehand, if I was to run a new route or anything like that, it all requires, you know, research, which, you know, comes in handy from the degrees. Obviously, you know, taught me how to do kind of historical research, but just kind of knowing some of the history. I mean, there's the classic thing with a history degree, people always ask you like everything. They kind of think, oh, you know, you've studied a history degree, therefore you know all of human history ever. So you always get asked like, you know, about this or that, and if you say you don't know, people are, oh, what kind of historian are you? It's like, well, you know, there's a lot of history. Obviously you're going to specialize in certain parts of it. But yeah, I mean, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I went to university, and kind of fell into brewing to a degree. You know, it was kind of, you know, I liked beer. It was something I, you know, I was passionate about and become more passionate about since, you know, working in the industry. But a lot of it was just kind of, yeah, chance and what was about, you know, in the area I lived in. It's not, I think you can plan a lot, but you don't always obviously know what opportunities are going to come up. You know, so yeah, bit of a strange one, definitely doing the history and ending up in brewing.
yeah, so out of curiosity, you went to uni.
Yeah.
In between that, you were working in a job that you were in prior to going to uni as well, so you had the opportunity to grow. What was the moment that you turned around and were like, okay, I'm going to take this journey now, there's enough opportunities that have come up, I want to play around with going into brewing and setting up your own company?
Yeah, I mean, I think I as I said, I worked at the brewery before university and during university, and it was, you know, I said a lot of it was just the kind of jobs that, you know, no one else really wanted to do. So cleaning casks, cleaning the floors, cleaning the tanks, nothing that glamorous. Obviously, when I was working, I wasn't, you know, brewing when I first started working there. And at the time that I finished university, the brewery that I was working at was expanding, and you know, they needed another brewer, so the opportunity was there to train up. It seemed like, you know, something fun to do, quite interesting job. Again, a little bit like what I was saying with history, where people kind of think you know everything about all history. Like when it comes to brewing, people kind of romanticize it a little bit, and they think you just stand around drinking all day. Obviously, that's not the case. It's quite manual. It's quite hard work. So, you know, I trained as a brewer, and I did that sort of on and off from when I first started working there so I started working at the brewery in, I guess it would have been 2007, and I stopped working at that brewery in 2016. So about 9 years, and probably about 5 of them I was brewing. And brewing, as I said, yeah, you brew different beers, but the process is quite similar. Depending on what beer you're brewing, you might change ingredients and stuff. So the general process is, it takes a similar amount of time. It's quite kind of, after a while, you get to know it quite well and how to do it. But you know, I just wanted a little bit more variety and a little bit less kind of backbreaking manual work, which it can be quite often. So I started, you know, to look up ways of you know, kind of branching out and doing different things. So initially, while I was at the brewery, I used to do outdoor events for them. So, you know, from time to time, they'd get people asking, you know, can you do a wedding bar or maybe a summer fete or something like that? And I would run the bars for the brewery, and they were just actually pretty easy to do. So long as you had a van and the equipment, you could just go and pitch up and do the bars. So the initial idea when I set my own business up was to do just do outdoor events.
Yeah.
So I started doing my own events while I was still working at the brewery. I did a beer festival in the village where my parents live, and you know, I went out and got a couple of summer fates and music festivals, some of which I still do today. Did a lot of weddings, and I went back to the brewery and I said, look, you know, I'm doing this. I'm thinking of leaving here and doing that, you know, full time. And the brewery, again, were quite supportive. And I said to them, you know, like, I'm going to do this whatever happens. So initially they said to me, you know, you can work here for 4 days a week and work for yourself 1 day a week. Then it went kind of 3 and 2, and then I left there, you know, completely. Obviously it was good for the brewery because I wasn't producing my own beer at the time, so I was using their beer whenever I was doing outdoor events. But I bought my own equipment, and I bought a van, and I was, you know, going around doing all these events. Then I left the brewery to do that full time, and at that point I knew it was going to be a bit of a shock, you know, not having a full time wage or like a, you know, monthly wage when, you know, it was all reliant on my events. So that's when I started doing the tour guiding. I'd actually been on a historic pub tour. Someone had bought me for Christmas, and I thought, oh, that would be, also I thought, you know, that'd be quite easy to do. So I actually emailed the company that I'd been on, and the guy that runs it, a guy called John, was really, you know, he often gives people a shot if they kind of email him, if he's got the work. So I started doing tour guiding for him. And I just loved it. About a third of all my work ended up being tour guiding, some through John's tour company, which I still do tour guiding for today, and started, you know, developing my own tours and doing various different tours for other breweries. So that kind of meant at least I could pay my rent, and then I could go out and try and get, you know, more events and what have you. And then I started getting people asking, you know, could you come and do brewing for us? Could you, you know, a lot of breweries, this country's quite weird in that you have cask and keg.
Right, okay.
And it's kind of, the industry sort of split between the two. So general sort of rule of thumb is that cask is more like on the traditional end of the scale, and keg's more on the kind of, you know, newer, or there's a lot of kind of buzzwords and stuff in the industry, but sometimes they, you know, people might say craft beer is kind of keg and cask beer is traditional, but not always. I mean, it depends how the brewery likes to describe themselves. But the traditional cask, kind of more new wave stuff, keg. And sometimes, you know, one brewery might want to do, you know, vice versa. They might want to make a keg brewery, might want to make cask, or cask might want to make keg. And because they're kind of specialized in one or the other, they don't always know, you know, how to go about doing that. And the brewery that I'd come from did both. So, you know, obviously I met a lot of other breweries whilst being in the industry, and I was going to kind of trade shows and stuff. And so people started asking me, could you come in and show us how to make a keg beer, or show us how to make a cask beer, or help us with this recipe or that recipe or whatever. And so I started, you know, doing kind of brewery consultancy. And that kind of just happened. It wasn't like, you know, something I planned. And again, that become kind of like a third of my work. So, you know, with the outdoor events, that became obvious quite quickly that, you know, that's very much like a summer thing, or kind of like half of the year. You do get a little bit around Christmas, but there's a big quiet period in the year. So I kind of had to diversify, and that was when I started kind of chasing the brewery consultancy. So yeah, the three things just kind of organically grew out of that kind of initial jump into, you know, setting up my own business. And you know, I had quite a clear idea, yeah, we're going to do events and we're going to go out and find all these events and what have you. But then, you know, it did not pan out like that, and other stuff came along.
I love that. Sorry, interrupting there. As I'm listening to you, and I find myself going, wow, okay, from where you started, you know, doing the work that no one else really wants to do, you know, the cleaning and that, but it's led you to then only in a short period of time, really, when we think about it over a few years, you've been able to now come up with 3 directions that experience has led you to go on. I suppose in that, now you've finally reached the craft beer man, you're now branching into, or you're now officially in your own business, aren't you? You collated all of those and more. What would you say your biggest successes and your biggest barriers have been on that journey so far? So just up to the point we're at before we tell everyone about the craft beer man and where you're at right now.
I think, I mean, for me, the biggest success or kind of what, you know, I value the most of it is, you know, just having some autonomy and kind of managing to, you know, set up and run a business that pays me enough to live, you know, and do, you know, can obviously pay my rent and food and all the rest of it, but also, you know, have a little bit to spend on holidays and this and that. So that's kind of the biggest success is, you know, it not just kind of blowing up in my face and having to go back and get a job for someone. It's nice to be able to, I mean, don't get me wrong, if I take time off work, a big downside of running your own business is you can't, you know, you don't get paid if you're off on holiday or whatever. Obviously, you know, if you work for someone, you get holiday pay and what have you. But it's nice not to have to, you know, apply to have the time off. Like if you can have the time off, if you know, had a good enough year, then you can take off, you know, whatever time you want, which is, as I said, assuming you've earned enough money to do so.
Yeah.
That's kind of really nice. So having a business that allows me to kind of live the life I do is kind of the biggest success. The biggest barrier is definitely money. I mean, I think, you know, like, I don't know if people might often give you, you know, kind of philosophical answers to this or whatever, I don't know, but at the end of the day, if you don't have the money, it's very hard to kind of, you know, do everything you want to do with your business. I mean, like even now, obviously the brewing industry is quite competitive.
Yeah.
I don't, you know, anything that I invest into my business is you know, stuff that I've, you know, doing my business. So it kind of grows slowly. Sometimes you see other businesses and they've got investment and you just, you know, it's so good to have, you know, a massive investment like that. Obviously it would help a lot. Yeah, I think money's definitely the biggest barrier to you know, growth of the business, and yeah, it's important.
Yeah, but that's you being honest. You know, you mentioned philosophical there. This is about showing people that, yeah, you can come from any starting point and achieve something great, but the reality is that money does play a game and there are stresses, and it doesn't just happen overnight, and that's a big message to get out there. So prior to me interrupting and asking you about successes and barriers, which thank you, where are you at now? Like, you know, you've been on this crazy journey. Where are you at now?
Yeah, it's obviously, everything I do has taken a pretty big hit with COVID. So that has, you know, not been the best time, and it's obviously forced me to kind of diversify a little bit. I had just before, so it was in March last year, we started producing our own beers, and yeah, obviously it was pretty hard time because we launched our first beer, and then like I think the first kind of brew came back to us, and we got you know, everything went into lockdown, so it was a bit of a kind of frightening time, but quickly kind of repackaged a lot of it into mini kegs and stuff that we could do home delivery for, little, you know, 9-pint kegs. Did a bottle brew, so we had a load of bottles to deliver, and just started delivering it to people's houses, and you know, that went really well. We're still, you know, delivering now, so that's kind of a new part of the business, and every week, you know, go out on deliveries. Obviously the pubs are now reopened, so we are delivering to pubs again, well, I say again, we never did in the first place. That was the initial plan, but obviously the pubs all shut pretty quickly after we had our first brew done. So, delivering to pubs, delivering to people's houses. Got a website up which people can order from, which is a little bit of a work in progress. It needs some copywriting and stuff done, but you can order beer off of it, which is nice. So yeah, that's kind of where things are headed. I want to kind of grow that aspect of it. It's quite nice going out into the pubs and bars and seeing your beer on the tap. That's quite a nice experience. And just kind of seeing people out and drinking your beer and enjoying, the product that you've made and the recipe that you've made. So that's kind of where it's going. And then obviously with the easing of lockdown and stuff, the tour guiding is coming back. The outdoor events are coming back. We actually just had 2 outdoor events in the last couple of weeks, which was all a bit last minute, but we got there and got it done. So hoping next year we can have a kind of full summer of events again. With the beer side of things, it's all branded up as the Craft Beer Man, but it's actually 2 separate companies. So tour guiding and the outdoor events are under one company, and the consultancy, cellar engineering, which is kind of, we haven't really talked about, but that sort of came along the way somewhere. I used to do cellar engineering for the brewery, or kind of some of the cellar stuff, and then I went and did some training after I left there, so I do a lot of cellar work for different breweries. So the cellar engineering, the consultancy, and the beer is under a different business. So they're branded up the same, but they're kind of structured as 2 separate businesses. And when I started doing the beer, my dad actually sort of came on board with that business. He does project management. He's in the building trade, but he's kind of looking, or he's always kind of looking to do new things. And I think he just kind of likes the beer. So he gets out there and does a bit of sales for it. And he doesn't, obviously know all as much about beer as myself, but I think he just enjoys kind of learning about it and, kind of helping out with that. So the kind of beer sales, it's nice to have someone else. Everything else I've done, including, the cellar engineering and the consultancy, is really just myself. But the beer sales has allowed me to bring in, have someone who helps with sales. So my dad comes in and he's helped in a lot of ways. A lot of the beer is stored up where he lives, so got a big kind of cold store there. So that helps, a lot. And there's various other people that kind of come in and help with that. Someone I knew from back at the brewery comes out and helps me with pub visits and promotions and stuff. So it's a little bit more like a growing business, that one. There's people coming in and working for, the Craft Beer Man and the beer sales side of it. And if we can grow it enough, it'd be nice to have some full-time staff, and have like a kind of proper team, as opposed to people just coming in and, just myself or just bar staff, is what we had before. So, yeah.
Super exciting, and I can see it. Your eyes lit up as you said, it'd be nice just to get to a point where you have like permanent staff. Because I was about to ask, where do you see yourself if I spoke to you in a year's time? Where do you see yourself? Whether you're looking at all the other areas, 2 businesses separately or together, where do you see yourself in a year's time and what you're offering? Because you offer so much, and I think it's really important to highlight that, and each of them of value in their own right.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to, it would be nice to have, with the beer sales, it'd be nice to have a team that can kind of run that and sell the beer. I do the deliveries at the moment, but hopefully we could bring someone on at some point who might do sales and some deliveries, and just a general kind of person to kind of help out with that. I don't want a massive company or anything like that, but maybe 1 or 2 staff members and myself would be kind of a nice place to be in, quite like a small small company, and it's quite nice just to you know, have something like that. I do with my dad as well. You know, he's come on board, and it's just nice to, you know, spend a bit of time with him. And he's quite a, you know, he's a bit of a businessman. My dad, he's had his own business since he was like, you know, I think 18, 19. He's done various different things. So yeah, it's just nice to do something with him. It's what he likes doing. So good to kind of, you know, yeah, good to kind of bring him in and spend a bit of time with him. So I think growing that would be kind of the goal at the moment. The consultancy and the cellar engineering is sort of where it needs to be. You know, we get plenty of work there, and obviously the events and the tour guiding will hopefully continue to come back while, you know, restrictions and stuff ease. So you know, just kind of getting those things back to where they were and growing the beer sales is kind of the goal now. Yeah, I mean, the beer sales is quite fun. It's you know, it's nice to come up with new recipes and that kind of stuff. So yeah.
No, thank you. And I love the fact that you and your dad are in partnership, that you're together as well, because, you know, there's something special about that father and son or family members coming together and supporting each other in various ways. So I'm excited to even see where that partnership goes.
I think he'd like to get more involved. You know, he obviously has his own business, which takes up most of his time. So he doesn't get too involved in the day-to-day of the beer sales, but I think that's something he's kind of moving more towards. He likes to get out there and visit people and try and sell the beer and stuff.
Brilliant.
So yeah, it's good. But I mean, as I said, just the space to store the beer has been a massive help. I mean, you know, what I said to you before, having, you know, the money to do these things, you know, sometimes you've got to kind of find alternatives that, you know, I mean, I'm lucky that I had that, you know, support. As I said, my dad's got the room that we could put a cold store up in, like his back garden, basically, which is where the beer is stored. Whereas it's a yard that he has at the back of his, you know, out the back of his house. So we've got the cold store there for the beer. You know, if I didn't have the room to put it there, I would have had to hire somewhere, and that's obviously an added cost to the business. So that's been really helpful with this, you know, in the start, not to have that. You know, in the long run, maybe we will hire somewhere when we need more room, but for now, you know, it works, and that's where everything's stored. So having that support is been really helpful. And you know, it doesn't always have to be family members. You know, I've had support from friends and what have you. I think something, you know, said, if you don't always necessarily have the money, you might need to think, where else can I do this, or how else can I do this? It's not going to cost me as much as, you know, renting a premises or whatever. Anytime that you get an overhead, I mean, you know, like I bought a van to do deliveries, and that, you know, I have to pay X amount each month to have the van. Obviously, any overhead you have like that, you've got to then, you're setting yourself, whether you know it or not, you're setting yourself a target. I have to make this much each month. I have to sell this much each month in order to pay for this. And so, you know, when you're starting out, the less of that you can have, the better. You know, obviously some of it's inevitable. You know, you need a van to do deliveries, but I've been quite lucky really to have that space, you know, to use for my dad. And I mean, yeah, like eventually, if we earn enough money, he'll earn money out of it as well. You know, he sort of owns part of that side of the business. So, you know, I guess you could say it's not free. He's going to get some money out of it, but there's no initial cost, you know. So that was quite lucky to have that.
And I think, again, it comes down to, you know, and we've kind of touched on it throughout this call, it takes time. Although your journey in the grand scheme of life, so to say, it's been short, it does take time, and it takes patience and commitment and passion to keep going and trusting the process, so to say, and believing in what you do and having a powerful support network. So I suppose I want to hand it to you to say to the audience that are listening and going to be watching, what message would you send to them if they're like, right, okay, oh my goodness, I have no idea what life has in store for me. Like, where do I go?
I think, it's obviously it's not for everyone to start their own business and try and make something of it, because it can be quite stressful if when, like, even now you don't necessarily know where your next lot of money is going to come from. Obviously, outside of just earning enough to run the business, you need to earn enough to live, pay for your rent and food and all the rest of it. So, it's not necessarily for everyone, but I think if you put yourself in a situation where you can take opportunities that come, it's a good thing, because you don't have to necessarily know. I mean, as I said, some people like to plan everything out and have a clear idea of where they're going. I mean, I don't really know, like 5 years from now, what I'll be doing, but just having the opportunity to follow, paths as they come up, I think is quite, it's quite important. Like, for example, as I said, when I first left the brewery, I bought a van at the time to do the outdoor events. It was a full-size transit van, so it's quite a big van. Funnily enough, it would probably be better for deliveries now, although I have a caddy, which was a little bit, cheaper than getting a full-size van. So I have the caddy now. The transit was getting a little bit older, and it's not, ULEZ compliant, so it's not really good for delivering in London. Every time I drive into London, we'd have to pay a fee and all the rest of it. So I was going to sell that, and then, my wife said, well, why don't we, this was during lockdown, we didn't have anything to do. She said, why don't we turn it into a camper van and see if we can rent it out? And we went in with another friend of ours, got talking to in the pub about it, and between the three of us, we converted it into a camper van and we rent that out. So that's kind of another, income stream, separate business, and just having the opportunity to do that. I mean, obviously, like I said, a part of it's because we had lockdown and COVID and there was nothing else to do, so we had the time to do it. But running my own business, it gives me the time to also do the admin for that. And what I'm saying is, if you give yourself, or try and create the lifestyle where you can take those opportunities, then I think it's a good thing. It gives you a bit of variety, and it means you don't necessarily know what's coming up. If you'd asked me 2 years ago what you're going to be doing in 2 years, I wouldn't have said, I'll be owning a camper van and renting that out alongside everything else I do. But that's obviously what's happened. So I think, a lot of it is, a lot of your choices are chance, and what comes along, you just got to kind of take them as they come.
That's amazing advice. I think opportunity, when they come along, it's like a yes and no game. Does it appeal? Yes. Like, just step outside your comfort zone, because again, you never know where it's going to lead you, and the opportunities that can arise from just being a little bit more curious. But Chris, I just want to say a huge thank you for coming on, sharing your story, and inspiring me to show that wherever your starting point is, be curious, take up opportunities, because you never know where it's going to lead you. I will make sure that everyone has your details in the comment box below. So guys, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thank you very much, Chris.
I hope it was helpful. Yeah, thank you.